You are now listening to the Mastering Happiness podcast with Dr. Joel Wade.
There are people whom you've known or met who have a powerful quality to them. They know themselves. They seem comfortable in their own skin. They may be shy or they may be outgoing, but in either case, they don't appear to be flustered or thrown off balance in a fundamental way very easily. And even when they are, they regain their equilibrium quickly and continue on. They're the same person across many situations. The quality that you're seeing in such people is integrity. Integrity is one of those words that can be mysterious and vague. The implication can be that integrity is inborn, and when somebody has integrity, they just have it, like someone can have good looks or talent. But there's nothing automatic, and there's really nothing mysterious about it. Living with integrity is a way of being in the world that we can practice and master, a set of skills that we can work on and improve. And in doing so, we can have a tremendous positive impact, not only on our own lives, but on the lives of those around us, even on the culture in which we live. But first, we need to define what integrity means and how we can practice it. And then we can look at what living with integrity can do. To live with integrity is to integrate what we think, know, and believe with what we say, and to integrate what we say with what we do. It's a state of consistently weaving and reweaving our understanding of ourselves and our relation to the world as we grow and learn and experience. Integrity also presumes a basic level of honesty, a willingness to look at ourselves, to question what we think we know, and to continually look for evidence that what we believe to be true is actually true. This can often take courage. Not everything we find within ourselves and others is pleasant, nor is everything that we believe at any given time true. But as with all virtues, living with integrity is not something that we have, it's something that we do. We don't come into the world with integrity ready-made. Living this way is fulfilled through living congruently with our understanding and principles, and taking the feedback from reality about how accurate our understanding and principles actually are, even when we don't like what we find. As such, our integrity is always a work in progress. Because of this, the concept of redemption is a prerequisite. It's fine to hold an ideal of how you should behave, but we don't come into the world with perfect knowledge and unwavering moral clarity. We make mistakes. We do things we wish we hadn't. And sometimes we forget ourselves in the heat of emotions or the lure of promising opportunities. We don't always think things through as well as we wish, and we sometimes do things we come to regret. Living with integrity in the real world would be impossible without the potential of doing something wrong, learning from it, having empathy for those we may have hurt, taking action to correct it, and becoming a better person through understanding our experience and adjusting our behavior accordingly as we grow. The pain and shame of confronting our hurtful behavior, our mistakes, and our failures, and if possible, making up for the harm that we may have caused, is part of the process of integration. Avoiding these feelings can keep us from learning from what we did wrong and from growing as a person. Failure is an essential part of success at anything, including living well. The places we get thrown off track are the very places we have the most to learn. When we feel shame and regret, we're getting powerful feedback from our own selves that we need to do things differently, unless we want to keep feeling that very same shame and regret over and over again. Tuning into this feedback between our values and reality can also be a powerful mechanism for influencing the people around us in good ways. We don't have to be in a position of great power to have a positive impact on the culture in which we live. The decision to live with integrity, the devotion to seek what's true and to live our lives according to our understanding and principles, can be a very liberating experience. A commitment to living this way involves adopting a few general principles that can serve as guideposts to moral decision-making. We decide to value what's true, to strive to understand ourselves and the world, to understand others, which requires empathy, to know what we value, to know what we believe. We decide to pay attention to feedback, pain, satisfaction, joy, disappointment, and genuine admiration that suggests that we have something to learn and integrate. And we decide to pay attention to these on an ongoing basis. When we feel ashamed or disappointed, this decision draws us to look at what we're doing that set us off track. Sometimes this happens later than we'd like. Then we need the courage to face the shame and regret that can make integrating such lessons so demanding. These can be the hardest moments in life, but in hindsight, they can be the moments that we feel the most pride over, or, in failing to do so, the greatest loss. This is the personal, individual experience and action of living with integrity. But we don't live in a vacuum, isolated from others. The impact that we have on each other is significant. And in this, the role of a person living with a high degree of integrity can be substantial. We know from some very interesting research what a profound effect we can have on each other's behavior, for good or ill. Our personal relationships, and even those people who are 3 degrees of separation away from our personal relationships, friends of friends of friends, are our sphere of influence, and we are theirs. What we say and do makes a real impact on those around us, and even on those a moderate distance away. In a 2007 study, Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler, drawing on a pool of over 12,000 subjects, found out just how powerful our personal contacts with people can be. They outline this in their book, Connected. Here are some examples. A person's chances of becoming obese increased by 57% if he or she had a friend who became obese. Among pairs of adult siblings, if one sibling became obese, the chance that the other would become obese increased by 40%. If one spouse became obese, the likelihood that the other spouse would become obese increased by 37%. For every happy friend we have, the likelihood of being happy ourselves increases by 9%. In other studies, these 2 researchers found that we can have a remarkable effect on others even several steps removed from our direct contact. If our friend's friend's friend quit smoking, we would be much more likely to quit smoking too. Even happy people we've never met 3 degrees of separation away have a positive effect on our own happiness. Good and bad behaviors pass from friend to friend. We influence each other's health and happiness just by our social interactions. Do these findings define the idea of freedom of choice? After all, if we're just passive recipients of social behavior, what's the use? Should we just flow with the tide of social influence? No, this is not the lesson to take from these examples. Living with integrity is a supreme act of individual consciousness. As we live with greater integrity, we become more truly ourselves. We can see proof of the power of integrity contained in one of the most dramatic psychological experiments ever conducted. You might be familiar with the experiment Stanley Milgram chronicled in his book, Obedience to Authority. Milgram sought to study the degree to which people would follow the dictates of an authority figure into clearly unacceptable territory. In these experiments, subjects entered a room in which there was an authority figure wearing an official white lab coat. The subject was instructed that his or her job was to administer a shock to another subject in the next room whenever that subject answered a question incorrectly. The first subject, the one giving the shock, had no idea that the second subject, the one to be shocked, was in on the experiment. The shock was just pretend, and the second subject was just acting. The first subjects thought they were just there to assist the experimenter, but they were the ones who were actually being studied. In front of them was a panel of switches marked with increasing voltage from 15 to 450 volts. Toward the upper range of voltage, the switchboard was marked Danger, Severe Shock, and then, past that, an ominous XXX. As the shocks were given, whenever the subjects would look to the authority figure or question what they were supposed to do, the authority figure simply answered, "The experiment requires that you continue." That's all they'd say. As the subjects gave the shocks, the pretend subjects from the other room expressed pain, pleaded to be released, screamed, and then finally yelled loudly that they had heart pains. Once the shocks reached 330 volts, there was just silence. What percentage of subjects do you think continued on through the expressions of pain, the screams, and the horrible silence through the full range of shocks? If you're not familiar with this study, I doubt that you'd guess correctly. Milgram himself expected very few, but fully 65%, 2/3, administered the full range of electric shock, past the danger zone, through the ominous XXX, all the way to 450 volts. But here's a fascinating, inspiring, and little-known piece of this study. When subjects came in and witnessed another subject refuse to continue, 90% of these subjects would then refuse to continue themselves. Think about that again for a moment. When people who are urged by an authority to do harm see that other people have refused to do so, only 10% continue to comply. Now, that 10% is still kind of creepy, but the difference from 65% down to only 10% is a pretty huge change. In practice, what this means is that we watch each other. What we see affects us. What we do in our daily lives can have a very positive or negative effect on the people around us. Far from suggesting that we're at the mercy of social forces, this makes a strong case for asserting our own leadership and personal virtue. When we return that extra change from a miscalculated bill, when we don't go along with others in our group who are willing to fudge data or appease a bully or gossip or intentionally hurt somebody, other people are influenced, and that's very likely to make a real impact. When we choose to behave with honor and integrity, particularly when other people aren't doing so, somebody will notice, and they may be likely to make a different and better decision as a result. We don't have to be in a position of great power to have a positive impact on our culture. It's in our day-to-day lives that most of us make our greatest impact. When we decide to disregard the negative status quo, when we live actively and congruently with who we are and what we value, we have a much greater influence than those who allow themselves to be drawn away from their moral center. But this takes practice. Learning and mastering living with integrity is no different in principle from learning and mastering a musical instrument. We get good at whatever we practice. If we practice going along with a harmful status quo, regardless of our own values and understanding, we'll get good at following others and at abdicating our own moral clarity. If we practice integrating our thoughts, feelings, and knowledge with our words and actions, we'll get good at becoming more profoundly who we are, and we'll have the power of moral clarity and a more unified purpose within ourselves. Do you want to make things better? Define what that means to you. Speak and act from your values and beliefs, and pay attention to the feedback the world gives you as to whether and in which ways you're actually making things better. If you find you're actually making things worse, you may have to reevaluate your values and beliefs. Then begin the process over again. When you strive to bring this degree of consciousness to your values, beliefs, and the consequences that follow from them, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much positive influence your own integrity actually holds.